A popular survival fantasy relies on the figure of the lone wolf. This person believes a fortified bunker in the woods, stockpiled with beans and ammunition, provides the ultimate safety net. But thermodynamically and historically, complete physical isolation is a dead end. When a regional power grid fails and global supply chains freeze, digital numbers in a bank account evaporate. A single human being separated from a social fabric cannot sustainably guard a perimeter, mend a broken leg, source clean water, all at once. The limits of this rugged individualism were tested in the winter of 2025 in Minneapolis. In December of that year, thousands of heavily armed federal agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol descended on the area. Operation Metro Surge flooded the Twin Cities with over 3,000 personnel, 5 times the number of local police, effectively occupying the city. Citizens found that macro systems relied on for civic order became an unpredictable threat. With standard emergency services compromised by the federal presence, residents replaced their trust in abstract institutions with direct reliance on the people living on their block. Civic life fractured under the weight of the surge. Schools and hospitals, places usually defined by safety, became sites for warrantless searches and detentions. The occupation turned lethal in January 2026. 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, were shot and killed by federal agents in separate incidents, simply for being outside and attempting to observe the enforcement actions. The residents of Minneapolis were trapped in a localized lifeboat. Since individual bunkers offered no protection and a political savior through the courts would take months, they were forced to solve their own security crisis. The community relied on a framework pioneered by Valerie Kaur, called revolutionary love. This approach defines love as sweet labor, the active, often dangerous work of extending care and protection to those being targeted. This philosophy demanded more than a private feeling. It required the creation of a parallel, underground safety net capable of replacing the failed public systems. This labor took the form of neighborism, a logistical operation that translated the philosophy of care into the mechanics of survival. Residents began weaving a secure network grid directly across their city blocks. Ordinary citizens organized encrypted signal networks to track the movements of unmarked federal vehicles. They used these channels to provide real-time movement data, protecting vulnerable residents who could no longer safely walk to work. Civilian patrol teams adopted the military acronym SALUTE: size, activity, location, uniform, time, and equipment. This allowed them to relay precise intelligence on agent movements, creating a neighborhood-wide surveillance net. The shadow infrastructure extended to education and basic needs. When public schools locked down, residents ran underground classrooms in church basements. Over the course of 6 weeks, volunteers coordinated the quiet delivery of over 12,000 boxes of groceries to families forced into hiding. These efforts represent horizontal mutual aid, an egalitarian system where everyone takes a turn at the oars, providing the material support necessary to keep a targeted population alive. Maintaining an underground supply line was only half the equation. The community also moved into a public-facing role to disrupt the armed presence in their streets. They deployed a tactic known as witnessing. Citizens used their own bodies and cell phone cameras as physical shields. By filming every encounter and refusing to leave the scene, they prevented agents from operating in the dark. This culminated during the subzero Day of Truth and Freedom, when multi-faith clergy and tens of thousands of ordinary neighbors mobilized downtown. They established makeshift checkpoints and stood directly in the path of unmarked vans. This overwhelming physical presence began reclaiming public space from the federal occupation. By coordinating their actions through a philosophy of radical empathy, the people of Minneapolis effectively disrupted the largest immigration enforcement surge in history. The logistical friction created by this organized witnessing and mutual aid had a tangible effect. The refusal of Minneapolis residents to remain isolated forced federal authorities to begin withdrawing hundreds of agents by early February. Individual firepower offered no protection against a citywide occupation. Minneapolis remained intact because a web of visibility and mutual aid made the neighborhood impossible to isolate. This illustrates what happens when a crisis hits. As traditional financial assets, which are simply digital claims on energy, lose their value, relational wealth becomes the only appreciating asset. Social capital is the only inflation-proof currency. If you want to know how wealthy you are, count the neighbors you can rely on in a genuine emergency. Preparation for the next decade requires moving beyond the bunker. Resilience begins when you step outside, knock on a door, and meet your crew. We have built our world on a high-stakes assumption that our industrial momentum is as unsinkable as the steel hulls we once set into the Atlantic. But the elephant in the room has grown too large to ignore, moving out of our private shadows and into the center of our lives. This is the meta-crisis, the tipping point where the stories of endless growth collide with the physical limits of our planet. The Lifeboat mini-course is your immediate, structured transition, a free 5-day journey delivered to your inbox to transform global anxiety into local resilience. Day 1 begins with an audit of the invisible, the energy and water systems you rely on every hour, yet rarely ever see. Day 2 forces a change in your geographical lens, challenging you to locate your true home within your watershed and local bioregion. You won't navigate this terrain alone. You will receive daily study guides and synthesized patterns designed to cut through the noise and reveal the architecture of change. Day 3 asks you to practice active hope in a world facing ecological overshoot. Day 4 introduces the demanding standard of revolutionary love. By tracing the water back to your neighbor's tap, you move beyond the narrow walls of self-help and into the expansive, interconnected practice of systems health. The climax arrives on Day 5 with the introduction of a specific framework for your future, the 9x21 harvest. Who is your mutual guiding spirit in this transition, and which 9 things will you choose to do? Stop waiting for the headlines to crush you. Sign up for the Lifeboat mini-course now. Access your Day 1 materials immediately and join the community hub where the next story of our world is already being written. You can remain tied to the illusion of a collapsing global credit card, or take this course to begin building real systems health today. The Earth is tired of the lie. It is time to dance with the truth.